Do you like the music, Mom?
Love it. Oh, yeah, that's true. That's for me. It's one of my faves.
Cool. Making sure that we're tough Rafa. All right. How we doing, Mom? Good setup?
Kinda.
Kinda. You look great. You look fantastic.
We have no choice. We're going.
Yeah.
We're doing it.
All right. Let's wait about 1 more minute. What's up? Got a bunch of fans. Brooke, Max, what's going on? All right, baby.
Max.
All right, everybody on the LinkedIn and YouTube side, no echo. I think we're good. Mom, this is the third one we've done, and you have been the best with technology. How do you feel about that?
I can't believe that's true, but okay, thanks. I'll take it.
For anybody that knows my mom, you know that she's fantastic with preparation, so I'm not surprised at all. Mom, regarding Family Affair, who loves that song better than you? Don't think anybody. It's for the mommies out there, Family Affair. So here we go. We are nationally broadcasting our relationship. How do we feel about that? Are you nervous a little bit?
Just a testament to how much I love you, because you know I'm not in my comfort zone, I'm in yours.
My mom, in starting this, when I brought this idea up to her, was very, very, very prominently letting me know that this was a favor. But we're bringing everybody outside our comfort zone. We're here to talk about something really, really important in the last day of this week on nutrition. So, Mom, there's no judgment in this room at all. If there's if you're feeling any judgment, it's just your ego telling you, but it doesn't matter at all. We're out here, we're doing it. People love you. And so for those of us that are just joining, to give you a sense of what this is all about, this is my second week in running this 330 series, the concept of running 300 miles in 30 days, but and raising money for Black Lives Matter. So in the link on all social media channels, it's there if you want to participate and donate, more than welcome to. But the real concept here, outside of that, in terms of me having this visceral take on this challenge and campaign and fundraiser, is to bring health habits into the fold. So this is my way of learning more and more about different subject matters that I think are really important as we build resilience within this really weird time of our existence. And to that, each week I'm covering something different in terms of the concept of health. And this week we're covering nutritional health. So we've talked a little bit about the idea of buying organic versus conventional, good food for your brain, for cognition. And today we're talking about the state of processing in America, which has really been a long-term journey. And so, you know, when I was talking to my mom, I'm bringing her into the conversation. She's like, why me? I'm not a nutritionist. I don't have any degrees in the space. But I think that she has a really incredible story. And part of my sell to her was, we are all on our own individual journeys as it relates to how to consume stuff that's really, really good for us. And Mom, you've come from a place where I want you to share your journey in a second, kind of like full circle to where you now have your own garden at home in Miami Beach. So first of all, before starting on your journey, what's it like being my mom? Tell us a little about that, not fishing for confidence.
What's it like being your mom? Well, it's awesome. Of course, it's awesome. No, I mean, you and Max are the greatest things in Dad and in my life. So yeah, it's
even Poppy getting a shout out
after another. We miss you guys a lot, and thank goodness we can see each other at least virtually. So
yeah,
I'm honored.
Even the big man, we're starting off emotionally, is what I'm talking about. Even the big man who's downstairs, I think, at home, Mom's like, you're not coming anywhere into the area where my camera is being shown. Right now, he's jumping around, probably in his boxers, shouting. Shout out to my dad downstairs somewhere. But Mom, let's talk about your journey, because your journey, I think, is really interesting. For those of you that don't know my mother, she grew up in New Jersey, and to two parents that were extremely active in the service industry, specifically around food. So You grew up in a really big family, five siblings, all under the same roof with parents that ran like a restaurant and bar. So tell us a little bit about like the start of your journey as it pertains to food and how you really ate when you were young.
Well, I mean, yes, they had a catering business, and I was brought up in that business, and we didn't lack for food, that was for sure. But I think like many people of my generation, I grew up like with the typical American household where, you're eating the foods that were popular back then. And normal stuff. But my recollection was, in the 60s and 70s, it was a lot of convenience foods. Convenience foods started to become more popular. I mean, obviously my mom cooked a lot, for both for the business and at home. But, we had our share of hamburger helper. We had our, a hamburger dish comes in a box. And, Velveeta cheese that came in a can, imagine. I don't even know if any of these foods are still out there, but
for sure, absolutely.
Yeah, it was a lot of convenient foods. It was shelf stable. That became a big thing at that time. Women were starting to go into the workforce in a big way. I think anything that could make life easier was important. So there were a lot of those kinds of things. Kraft singles, not real cheese, but the singles, because why? They would last forever, right? They didn't go bad. White bread, because it tasted good. It was fluffy and it tasted good and it lasted forever on the shelf. So things like that. So a lot of, I think more refined food than what we're used to today.
Well, these are things that all still exist for sure. But they say that when you go to a grocery store, if you really want to be healthy, to stick to the perimeter, and all this stuff really exists kind of like in the middle, right? And you largely grew up in this like second wave of an agricultural revolution, which is really built upon the idea of convenience and, like you said, shelf life. And for having two parents that were so active in feeding so many people beyond the six underneath their roof, there had to be a sense of like what's easiest to make for our kids without having.
Well, we were lucky. Most of our meals were homemade because my mom would bring home food from work. So
right.
That was a plus. I mean, we had a lot of home cooked meals. It's just different kinds of ingredients than we're used to today, and I think we're more attuned to the health aspects of some of those things, and. So
that was some of the good stuff too, though, because your background ethnicity back is Polish. So like I remember going to Grandma and Jaji's house and having kielbasa and pierogies and all that stuff that still weighs in my mind of like really good hearty food. Maybe not with the best nutritional content, but still yummy. So
well, a lot of carbs in those pierogies. They're really good for your run if you're going to focus on that. But anyway, it's all the stuff. I think whole foods are good. So the less processed.
You cut out for a second, I think.
More today.
1 second. You're back. Okay, you cut out for a second.
My Wi-Fi might have gone out because you know how the Wi-Fi is here.
Yeah,
so
all good. No worries. So coming from that place where you lived under your parents' roof, you've been on a journey since then. So after college, moving down to Florida, was there any catalyst or any moment that really drove you actually starting to pay a little bit more attention to what you were eating? Like any individual moment that along your journey?
Well, I think if I could point to anything that kind of started my interest in nutrition and let's just say food as medicine, I had a condition that's called reactive hypoglycemia, which hypoglycemia is kind of a well-known term. Reactive hypoglycemia means that your blood sugar is reacting to the food you eat. So it's not a diabetic condition. It's basically one where your insulin is not necessarily doing what it's supposed to. And the frustrating thing was that this existed for a really long time and nobody would believe me. No doctors, my glucose tests would, come out normal, but I wasn't feeling good. I just wasn't feeling good. There's, when your blood sugar's not right, there's irritability. It affects your moods. It affects your energy levels. it produces cravings. It's just, everything is out of sync. And it took years because I literally couldn't get a doctor to listen to me. I finally, I did an experiment on my own where it was maybe one of your birthdays, I don't know, but I allowed myself to have birthday cake, and I think I ate pasta. And these were things, I mean, imagine. And the next day, I basically couldn't move. I was like comatose.
Wow.
I was hit by a truck. I mean, I felt like just horrible. And I called my doctor and I said, please give me a referral to an endocrinologist.
Uh-huh.
I went to the endocrinologist and I walked into her office and I told her my symptoms, and she immediately said, you have reactive hypoglycemia. And I cried. I literally cried because I was so relieved that someone was taking me seriously.
Told you something real.
So she prescribed a blood glucose monitor, which is the thing where you prick your finger and drop of blood and all that. And I would do that before eating and then 20 minutes after, and so on.
Every
and so
day?
forth. Oh yeah, every day for a few months until I got a handle on it, because basically I had to figure out what foods were triggering me, what foods were causing my insulin to become overstimulated, go up really high, not dangerously high, but high for me. And then what would happen is it would go really low. And when that happened, that's when, you feel like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You don't, like some other person takes over. You don't feel
total
like
lack of stability.
Oh yeah, terrible. So after figuring that out, and it has to, I learned about at that time, the glycemic index of foods was a really big thing. So I learned about that, and just kind of taught myself, what worked and what didn't work. And then eventually I didn't need to use it anymore. So that was what started my realization that what we eat is super, super relevant to how we feel, and the nutritional content of food, and what things are, more important for your body than less so, et cetera. So it's been a journey, but I think it started with that. And then secondly, the second thing I can point to is Max, your brother, your wonderful brother.
Shout out to Max.
Shout out to Max. He developed a lot of ear infections, and he was about age 7. And when kids back then had a lot of ear infections, the doctor would say, well, it's not good to keep them on antibiotics, so we'll just put tubes in your ears. And tubes mean no swimming, you can't get you can't go in the ocean, none of those things, which would have been inordinately hard. And at 7, that was a little late for tubes. Like, it's easy to do when kids are, super little. So I really didn't want to do it. And I checked, it just so happened I had a friend and she had a contact at a naturopath, and that person recommended that I take him off of dairy and sugar. So we had taken him to Miami Children's Hospital, had his hearing tested, all of those things, because we wanted to make sure that we were doing the right thing. Took him off of dairy and sugar, and also there were supplements. He had to take like cast liver oil, which does not taste good. They make it now flavored, but back then they didn't. He was a trooper. He had to swallow, these supplements. They were large, and he did everything and stayed away from sugar. Imagine a 7-year-old. And so no ice cream, no candy, no dairy at all. But the remarkable thing is, we took him back to Miami Children's to test his hearing, and also, the fluid in his ears, and it was gone, and everything was fine. So we didn't have to have an invasive surgical procedure, and he was okay. So that was another thing. It was like, wow, this is amazing. So then, I just kept studying. And, you also know and part of my journey is I gave up meat and I became a vegetarian. I got very strict at one point in my life. I was a vegan. I carried both of you boys through, my vegetarian, dietary journey. And that lasted for 10 years.
That's why we're so healthy.
Well, I mean, it wasn't a bad thing. But
at a certain point, it affected you, like towards the end of the 10 years.
Exactly. I think, my body changed, my intestines, I don't know, my digestive, things change in your body, I guess, as you age. And at some point I was lacking, I just didn't feel good. I started feeling really not, like, lethargic and not good. And I was obviously not getting the nutrition I needed. So I started to incorporate, eggs and dairy and back into my diet. I incorporated fish. I stayed with that for a while, and then eventually I started eating meat, but it's strictly grass-fed, grass-raised, sustainably raised, meat where and this is a shout out to my brother Ted, because he's got Ted's Butcher Block in Charleston, South Carolina, which is
best place in Charleston. Yeah,
he taught me a lot about sustainability and how the animals are raised and how it matters, and how they're raised, how they're fed, how they're slaughtered. All those things matter. And I'm also now into gardening, and I'm big into the regenerative way of farming. So I think there's a place for all that. Anyhow, with respect to that, I now kind of eat a very wide ranging diet. I tend to stay away strictly from refined carbohydrates, and I stick with fruit-based oils. I still to this day do not embrace sugar at all, and that's worked for me. It's more whole foods, and it's but more, I think, a little bit wider than it had been in the past. So
yeah,
I hope I answered your question.
For sure. So let's go back to part of the journey before we dive into your use of oils. I think I really want to get. I think a lot of people would be interested in understanding, like, there's so many oils that are out on the market. What do I use for what? There are like a lot of misconceptions on smoke point and using some things for some things and not others. But before we dive into that, I think what I've heard you say from all of that is you started conceptualizing the use of food largely as medicine, and not medicine to solve a cure for X, Y, and Z necessarily, certainly that, but also as a means of somewhat preventative care, but also just like holistically taking care of your body. But to that, I think a lot of things have been sold to the populace on being able to do that, including like the fat-free craze. And you've largely lived through that. And I remember that too. What was that like? And how have you been able to reconcile all of the diets that come into the world that are marketed so well to us, and maintaining something that's a little bit more in the middle of the spectrum?
Yeah, so I mean, the fat fruit craze was nutty. I guess that was like the 80s, 90s. I just remember they invented Snackwell's cookies, and they were fat free, and you could literally, this is the marketing. You felt like you could eat the whole box because they were fat free. Because hey, there's no fat, so I can't get fat. This was the sort of the party line. So I think the big food companies are very powerful in their marketing and what they want us to believe, and they're also very influential, unfortunately, because it's led people down a path of not being healthy. And there's, as we know, tremendous obesity in our country, and there still is, heart disease. And I think that the messages out there are very confusing for people. I mean, I understand it's really hard, but the fat-free thing was not. They took out the oil and they just put in more sugar, and it really didn't have a good result for anyone.
Right. And the use of I've read and listened to. So partly we've talked about like processing is happening because of making things more convenient and accessible in shelf life, but the use of things like canola oil and these possibly cheaper alternatives is largely because, so I've read, these conglomerates have really wanted to, in order for things to stick together to make these foods like Snackwells, they needed to use something like oil as a means to combine everything. I don't even know, like
they use a lot of chemicals and emulsifiers and all sorts of stuff. I mean, a lot of chemicals. So
eating something that didn't have taste, and olive oil has a beautiful taste, but you wouldn't want olive oil in your Snackwell necessarily, right? So canola oil and some of these others are built so that they have zero taste and are easy use to all these given companies.
Yes, and I think they're industrial oils that are refined. Right. They're heated at extremely high heats, and they oxidize and they become rancid, but they're cheap. Right. And that's what ends up in our food. So yeah, it's it's really unfortunate, and they're in everything. It's really unfortunate. It's even in Whole Foods. If you go to the prepared food, what used to be the where you get the bulk food, to take out the prepared food, whatever they call it, like not the salad bar, but the salad bar where they have the hot foods.
You're talking like about a Whole Foods or something.
Yeah. They use canola oil. It says it right there in all of those dishes. It's incredible. Yeah.
So I've become friends, and hopefully this is recorded and I can tell them that I gave them a shout out, but who are creating this company on pistachio milk, and they've been teaching me about how all these alternative milks have come to market and some of the good things and some of the bad things. I've become a huge fan of oat milk, for instance, but the majority of oat milks have canola oil to ensure a lot of different things. So even looking at the label to ensure that it doesn't have something like that. So, okay, so let's transition a little bit and start talking about your own personal use of, in respect of your nutrition, to the use of oils. There's a lot that are out there. And we talked a little bit about canola oil. I think that's like the one really popular thing in America that people gravitate to a lot because it's so prevalent. It's cheap. It's tasteless. It's marketed as having an extremely high smoke point. How do what do you canola? Yeah. So what do you like? How do you think about like what oils do you have in the cabinet right now? Would love to know that.
Okay.
And what do you use each one for?
So we mostly use olive oil, and I think
extra virgin olive oil or normal olive oil.
First cold press extra virgin olive oil. And I think people, consuming olive oil, first cold press is just, I mean, all the rancid oils are extracted at high heat. Olive oil is extracted, through pressing olives. I mean, it's fruit, right? And it's not heated. So that's super important. And I think it's well recognized as a desirable oil, no matter what your diet is, right? Is
that important because then like the associated nutrients and minerals aren't extracted out of the actual oil of what you're consuming?
Well, I think it changes the oil chemically to extract it at high heat or to try and I mean it's a different process, and it's actually, I think, and again, I'm not an expert on this, but I believe that when you extract, like when you create canola oil, I think they add like hexane or some chemical to then they chemicalize it to then make it more, shelf stable or whatever. I mean, I don't know why you would want to eat that. Like, so we have in our cabinet olive oil, and we cook a lot with that. Dad loves to make his scrambled eggs in the morning with coconut oil. So we cook with that occasionally, and then avocado oil, because that's that's also, you can use at very high heat, and it does not have any kind of taste to it, basically. So it's very neutral. But those are the only three that we have. We don't use anything else. And basically, I use mostly olive oil.
So one thing that I've read a lot about too is so we talk like the idea of diets, and I don't think either of us are a fan of kind of sticking to one diet, but there's one that has been thought of a lot in terms of having a lot of things that are good for you, is still kind of middle of the road spectrum wise, which is the Mediterranean diet, which obviously includes high use of extra virgin olive oil. There's a lot of things that we're talking about. And one thing that's extremely prominent is omega-3s. So I think that's become all the craze. I did a video on supplements. I just did a video on brain food. Omega-3s seems to be something that is like extremely, extremely critical to memory, to assisting with our cognitive function. It matches to a lot of what the structure of our brain. It's a fat that's extremely, extremely important to us. A lot of these other oils don't have it, and there's a huge difference between omega-3s and omega-6s. Processed foods, as I've understood, typically have more omega-6 than omega-3, and we should be taking like an even balance of the two, right?
Well, I think the important thing with regard to omega-3s and 6s. So I think if you're concerned about, when you think about the standard American diet, we, as in this country, consume way too much omega-6s, and your refined foods, and the other oils have a lot of omega-6s, but the ratio should be my understanding is the ratio should be something like 4-to-1, 6 to omega-3, omega-6 to omega-3, and it's like, I don't know, somewhere between 20 and 50-to-1, depending on your diet. So it's really out of whack, and that's the problem. So you can get omega-3 from cold fatty fish like salmon and mackerel and sardines and things like that, and other foods. And I think if you're eating a whole food diet where you're consuming real food, I don't know that I need to, or you need to, or people need to necessarily worry about the ratio and all of those things,
right?
Because you're going to get a healthy ratio. Nuts and seeds are really high in omega-3s. What else? So that's my thought. I mean, it's I don't worry about the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio of the oils that I know are good for us, and I just stay away from the ones that aren't, and also just stay away from processed foods, and just try and eat as close to whole food as you can. And I think the hardest thing about that, frankly, is cooking. If you don't like to cook, it's hard, because you can go to the supermarket, but if you're not going to prepare your own food, then your fresh fruits and vegetables are just going to go to waste. And I think that's, people who feel like, oh, I'm time constrained or whatever, or I don't know how to cook. It's easier to just grab what's in the box, what's in the middle of the supermarket aisle, and just eat that way. And I get it, but I think when you think about your health and your omegas and this, you're drilling down to micro, and I think the macro picture is stick with whole food. Stick with whole food, and your body will thank you.
Yeah. So you mentioned, I want to move on to sugar before we close out. I think one thing that everybody would benefit from is I don't think like you're necessarily an apostle of any one individual within the field of experts, but there's a couple of folks that you trust, you follow. So I want to make sure that we give people an understanding of like, who are some of these people if they want to do some more research. But I want to move on to sugar because it's just as rampant as the use of, say, like canola oil in the United States. It's in
definitely
majority of processed foods.
Right.
And you talked about your own experience as it relates to insulin. And I think that continues to be a massive problem in the United States. I think like 1 out of 3 people in the United States are diabetic or pre-diabetic, largely due to increased insulin levels, and that affects the brain in a lot of ways as well. And the number one disease we see in the United States is heart disease, which is largely impacted by this use. So you've mentioned to me like a lot of the idea of sugar, a lot of times it's hidden. So tell us about like how your journey with sugar and what you think about most.
Well, I'm super sensitive to it, so I just read labels, and you just need to know whether your food, if you're looking at a salad dressing, for example. I mean, we all may use olive oil and vinegar, but if you wanted to use a salad dressing, again, no judgment zone, right? People will use salad dressing. Look at the label, make sure it doesn't have canola oil or soybean oil. And see if there's sugar added. It's incredible how much sugar is added to our food, and why. We don't really need it. So that's the danger there. It creeps into everything, even bread. Which, there's no reason to have sugar in your bread. If you're making a cake, fine, but otherwise. So I just think that people don't realize. And it's hidden because it's under different names, but OSE, if anything ends in OSE, it's a sugar, dextrose, sucrose, all those things. Yeah. So,
are they just cheaper forms, really?
Well, I would probably guess that they're not more expensive forms because manufacturers are not going to be,
fructose corn syrup.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Corn syrup for sure. Yeah. I mean, like crazy, but.
And I think
definitely cheaper.
Like as I've gone on my own journey and understanding how we use these things, especially for physical use by doing like this challenge, sugar, or like what you mentioned, sugar being in bread, which is a simple carbohydrate. These are things that burn quickly, and if they aren't burned, turn into glucose and just sit as a fat store in your body, right? So when people complain about gaining a little bit of weight here and there, it's largely because they're probably eating something with sugar and it's just sitting there and they're not touching it or using it, right?
Well, I think it's these are, it's a lifestyle choice. So you have to make a decision of having, moving your body, exercising, right? And then just, eating healthfully as you can, without, going too crazy and beating yourself up or anything like that. But big picture, it's, there's something called bioindividuality, and that means that we're all different. So what works for me is not necessarily going to work for anybody else. So
which is why diets are like,
they're guidelines,
right?
They're guidelines. And, when I was exploring kind of what my path was, or what it's going to be, or how am I feeling, I looked at things like Whole30, and it was an interesting concept because it really, you've drilled down, it's almost an elimination diet. So that's what that is. To me, it's an elimination diet. It's a process of eliminating the things that could be causing problems with your gut health and your nutrition. And then you see what works for you. But you have to, it's an investment of time, and it's an investment of effort. And, you do have to cook your own foods, because everybody can't just eat a salad every day. It gets too boring. So I don't know. I mean, that's, I think big picture, big picture, and stick with whole foods, and do the best you can. Just do the best you can every day.
Yeah. So this has been an amazing dose of reality. I want to wrap. You have a quote that you love, that you kind of live by, from your favorite Michael Pollan. But I would love to leave people with, if they want to do more research, or even just to passively follow a couple of people, like you mentioned, just to have a good sense of guidelines and good advice continuously if they do seek. I know who those people are. I know that they're very, very active on social channels, and they're extremely active on podcasts. So I'd love to know, one, what is that quote that you love to follow?
Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Okay, Michael Pollan. And he's one of the, he's very prolific in terms of, he's written a lot. He's written about the omnivore's dilemma, what should we eat? And he's, I guess these are people that maybe are like Mark Hyman is a functional medicine doctor. One of his books is called What the Hell Should I Eat? I mean, it's, because there are so many confusing messages out there. And I think that they bring like a science to whatever the political correctness is that how we're eating today. And I think we need to keep, there is a science, the nutritional science is developing so fast, and there's a lot of confusing messages out there. And in today's media world, it's all headlines and, that grab you, whatever. So you can find anything on either side of any argument that you want to, it's very, very confusing and difficult sometimes to pick a path. But I think that those are two names that are fairly reliable. You like Max Lugavere. I know you mentioned him the other day. I think he's also, he's done a lot of research, and I think he's like normal, like based, his outlook is not too extreme and not too crazy and not too out there. Just, and then, you take it all with a dose of your own reality and what's good for you.
Personally. Yeah. I love Dr. Mark Hyman, because he's just very real and very, seems very normal, to your point, not out there. It's easy to understand. He brings a lot of science into the conversation, but in a way that's really easily digestible and intended. And then you mentioned one other name, Fire, that is somebody who's been around for like ages. You still have her book. You still refer back.
Sally Fallon. Sally Fallon. Well, she's the founder of the Weston A. Price Foundation, and the Weston A. Price Foundation is it's an older foundation. I don't know. I actually don't know that much about it, but the little bit that I do know about it is it's not politically correct eating. It's whole food based. It's nutrition that has withstood the test of time. I mean, it's been out there for decades. And he was actually a dentist, Weston A. Price. So that's their mission. Their mission is to have people, to teach people nutrition, but soundly based nutrition. So I think people can go to that, those types of sources, and then incorporate that into their eating patterns, and and understand what would be good, as opposed to demonizing certain foods,
Right.
And saying I can't ever eat that.
Yeah,
that's not realistic either, right? So
yeah,
I don't know. Does that help?
yeah. I just sent over in the comments those 4 names that were just represented. Anastasia just did so on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, Joe. And she even spelled them all correctly. So let's wrap, because it's a little past 12:30, and we have to go back to our work days. But I still appreciate everybody taking some time to have a bit of a lunch conversation with myself and my mother. Mom, I love you absolutely to death. Largely, I told you this personally, but a large reason why I'm doing this is due to your influence. So don't cry on us right now, but
I'm not going to cry.
thank you for that, for sure. And Poppy, I know you're downstairs jumping around, so thank you so much for your support, Dad. And Max is on somewhere as well. So thanks for your support, Max, but and everybody else as well. So thank you guys for joining. This is a wrap on week 2. We're looking to week 3 next week starting, where we're going to talk about biology, some of the more sciencey stuff behind the health habits, understanding that. So Mom, wave to the crowd. You did great. We're proud of you. It's over. You can have a cocktail now.
A little early.
I'll talk
Love
more.
you too. Love you too.
All right, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.